Hello and welcome to the Mental Health and series. Today we're joined by Dr. Jodie Guth, and we are talking about the abortion issue. I know that this is a sensitive topic, so I just want to say that in the beginning that we will be discussing mental health and abortion based on Dr. Guth's experience. So let's welcome Dr. Jodie Guth.
Thank you, Krista.
Thanks for coming on. It's been a long time since I've seen you in person, since you're in Louisiana, and I remember you from my Louisiana to Life days. But yeah, thanks for joining.
Absolutely.
So, can you tell us about your practice and the client types of clients that you've worked with, and just give a brief introduction of you and your work?
Sure. I completed a PhD through LSU in Louisiana, Louisiana State University in 2000, and had training in Texas. My areas of clinical training were primarily anxiety, depression, and eating disorders, and then was licensed in the state of Louisiana in 2005. And as part of my work in the clinic where I did my postdoc, I did a fair amount of work in chronic pain, psychological treatment of chronic pain. And it's been 20 years. Friday was my last day as an employee of a group practice. And it was an outpatient, very active clinic in a small city of Lake Charles, Louisiana. But during the time that I was working at the psychology clinic, I also worked at a pro life pregnancy center and had some interactions with women affected by abortion and child loss as well.
We're talking about a mental health issue in relationship to abortion, and all of our episodes this week have been kind of in a particular context, and this is the context that we're talking about today. I know that in preparation for this interview, and maybe since our pre-interview, you looked up the research of abortion in the psychological field. From what I know, and maybe and you probably have a lot more background in this than I do, but from what I know, the APA, that's the American Psychological Association, says that abortion is basically harmless to women. In the time that you worked with those women considering abortion, did you find that to be true? Or if you worked with any women post-abortion, did you find that to be true that it's harmless for women? Or what does the study and the literature say about that?
I have to say that when I felt called into the pro life movement, it was 2015. I was so naive. I was excited to bring all my training and all my work, my life's work into the pregnancy center. And I wanted to help these sweet ladies who were volunteering as counselors at the pregnancy center. And I really had not read the documents on the effects of women. I expected something entirely different from what I found. And as I was preparing for this talk, I don't see the advisories or the headlines coming from the APA to have changed very much. The task force on the effects of abortion on women, I think that was in 2008. And when I looked that up, it did say, I think I have some summary statements that the most methodologically sound research indicates among women who have a single legal first trimester abortion of an unplanned pregnancy, relative risk is no greater than risk among women who deliver. And then since that time, there's been another study called the Turnaway Study, seems to say that there is risk of harm for denying women access to abortion. And so I need to qualify this conversation that I'm not a researcher. I have not scrutinized this research, but I read the messages that are most available online. It is confusing because it's not consistent with the many, many, many conversations that I've had, typically with women who are in therapy for some symptom and their abortion story comes out kind of sideways, like as a surprise topic that they want to explore. The message that abortion is harmless has not been consistent with my experience in therapy with women.
Yeah, and I think you told me that you're going to be working with Rachel's Vineyard, which even though I didn't have an abortion, I have a sibling who died by abortion. I went to a Rachel's Vineyard, I think in 2016. So about the same time that you started feeling called to the movement when I was at Louisiana Right to Life. I went to a Rachel's Vineyard and they're usually a very small retreat. My research is very anecdotal. I only have a master's in psychology, so not nearly at the level that you are in your practice, but even just with the experiences from Louisiana Right to Life Days and my own experience at Rachel's Vineyard, it did seem like all the post-abortive women who were on retreat with me had very deep, impactful experience for them to have an abortion, but also for them decades later to open up about it and seeking healing for their abortions. And I remember in particular, there were counselors there and therapists there too to help us walk through our grief. And for me, it was a little complicated because I didn't have an abortion, but some women talking about like eating disorders. It was just interesting to see it kind of close up because I was on that retreat and we were sharing in every group. There were no small groups. It was the one group and we all shared in every session.
Wow.
And so it was very, very intimate. Yeah, very eye-opening, I guess. And I did the research on my experience on the sibling survivor experience, but another thing that I found interesting is that if you had an abortion when you were younger and then maybe 10 years later you got pregnant again,
Yes.
even seeing like an ultrasound, and for some of the women that I've met who are post-abortive, like sometimes there's like a lot of medical technological advancement and they're able to see younger and younger, like hear the heartbeat and things like that. And they can't even be happy at their next pregnancy because
Yes.
they have that realization that they terminated
Yes.
the last one. And so this clump of cells mentality like might help them be able to have an abortion whenever they're a teenager. But then whenever they have this reality of their pregnancy, like it comes with mixed feelings. And that's been interesting too. And it's not research. There's no research on those things, but that's just what I've seen.
Yes. It's interesting that the APA task force, the research was based on talking to women 30 minutes after an abortion procedure. And there were screening for depression, as I recall. And the number one emotion that was identified was relief. And so that work was taken to mean risk of depression is not very significant and that there would primarily be relief. But to generalize for all women forever that relief will stay the primary emotion, like we can't come to that conclusion. And Dr. Teresa Burke, who I think was the founder of Rachel's Vineyard, I pulled her book off my shelf, Forbidden Grief. It's kind of been tucked away. I'm really glad to get to know her. And I have not interacted with Rachel's Vineyard. I know that our diocese does offer it. I would like to have training. I would like to know if Dr. Teresa Burke offers continuing ed training for people like me who work in outpatient settings. I would love to offer, a book study with my clients who are struggling with this topic. So I'm intending to research that further, but just the idea of this relief and knowing what we know as a field in trauma therapy about delayed onset of PTSD symptoms that we learned through the VA, through it was World War II veterans who fought on the front lines, returned from their military experiences to their jobs and their families, and didn't process the trauma of war really until retirement. I think that's where the term came from of delayed onset. And so if a woman is, or a teen girl, or a woman in her educational years, early professional years, is focused on her needs, right? Then relief may sustain her, that may feel like the right decision. But what I've encountered with women in later years is more of a realization and more of a delayed onset kind of processing of the loss of children or grandchildren.
Well, relating it to PTSD is so interesting too, because even in my little capstone project, that was a part of my, like the foundation of it was from a Catholic perspective and a Catholic lens. And so, yeah, in my first iterations of the capstone, I guess it was the foundation that abortion is an act of violence and it's a violence on the woman's body. And because it's detrimental to the dignity of the human person, which is again very Catholic language, Catholic lens, that's kind of was presumed, I guess. Comparing it to PTSD is very interesting as well, because I think that's something that's more understandable for a person who maybe isn't in the realm of the pro-life movement or isn't talking regularly to people who have had abortions or been involved in abortions. Even there's ministry for people who leave the abortion industry. So can you say a little bit more on the delayed onset of PTSD? Like you were talking about veterans, World War II. Can you say more about kind of the psychological understanding of that? Maybe why it's delayed, or when someone's experiencing PTSD, perhaps
Right.
decades later, what does that look like
Right.
in a different context?
Well, as you mentioned, I've heard many women say that their understanding of a wanted pregnancy after they had experienced an abortion, termination of an unplanned or unwanted pregnancy, is when their symptoms, they didn't know that they would be horrified to see the abortion because it was that flooding of that was a child. I was misguided. I didn't know that I contributed to the loss of a child. Dr. Bernard Nathanson talks about his testimony as an abortion provider, and it was in the silent scream, right? That he saw the humanity of the unborn. At the time, there wasn't technology available, and he kind of talked about his own delayed onset of the trauma of what he had been involved in, completely understanding things in a different way. So that pregnancy and having a child, and typically women don't talk about it. I think this whole culture of reproductive care, which seems such an oxymoron, that abortion and care don't need to be in the same sentence, but that's the language that's being used, that there is freedom through abortion. That's just the water that we've been drinking culturally. For women to start to question that, there's not a lot of safe places to question. It's probably fair to say that women may not feel safe to talk to pro-life side or pro-choice side, that there are risks to both. And so there's kind of a silence, unfortunately, and it doesn't seem unusual that the kind of the delayed onset of processing would happen during a pregnancy or as children, reach the age that the client was when they had a termination or an abortion. I've been walking with older women who are grieving, their lack of grandchildren, when their friends are having grandchildren, and maybe there's not a job to keep them as busy, or maybe their parents have passed away and they're kind of aging alone, and they're wondering who will care for them in their later years. It's concerning that the conclusions that are promoted, that there is no harm associated with abortion and relief is the number one emotion. And even the Turnaway study, I think it was only 10 years of follow-up. I don't know if there is actual longitudinal data to really look. And then there's kind of the difficulty that it may be the case that the most traumatized of women who are post-abortive, they may not want to talk about it at all. Like we may never be able to study them. They may never, willingly participate in a study. I don't know. I'm not, certainly not fluent, but I would love to hear someone like Dr. Teresa Burke comment on that as well.
Yeah, that's something that came up in a different episode this week. Psychology is still kind of a new medical field. I don't know if you agree with that, but it seems like there's still quite a few developments to be made, and the way medicine developed over decades. I'm sure there are medical practices that we wouldn't use from 50 years ago. And I think hopefully with the clinical psychology and psychological literature, it will develop over time. I know you were qualifying this conversation, even in the pre-interview, that there was someone else that I could have talked to who is, more qualified or has worked with this population more. But at the same time, just the experience of working with women at the pregnancy center, which maybe we can go back to really quick, is very valuable. We're talking about at best piecing together literature that's not really all the way there. And some of them may be statistically problematic elements with the study. I've heard of one of the top cited references that says like abortion is harmless to women. They only asked a certain like a really small population of people too. So even looking at those studies with a more discerning and academic eye, like that's really helpful, which you have that background to understand those. So thank you for what you were just saying about all of those, I think 3 different studies you were mentioning. Really quick, the pregnancy center, maybe someone who's listening doesn't know what a pregnancy center is. So can you talk about what the center is and how you provided your services or helped?
I learned of the web of pro-life pregnancy centers only recently. I've been Catholic my whole life. I've been a mental health professional my whole adult life, but abortion really wasn't on my radar. I really didn't know much about Planned Parenthood, which seems to be the number one provider of abortion services, nor did I really know about Heartbeat International. I didn't grow up going to the March for Life. Like I only started to really understand things. So a pro-life pregnancy center is an answer or a resource for women who may want to confirm their pregnancy, have free pregnancy testing and ultrasound, to have someone sit with them and to understand their options, whether that would be to understand what it means to have an abortion procedure. At the time that I started with our local center, it was before the overturn of Roe v. Wade. So there were still clinics within a short driving distance in our state that were offering procedural abortions. And so it was educating women. Now, I was not a frontline counselor. I served in the capacity of consulting with the staff and having a caseload of clients who were parenting, helping them to raise their children. Many of them were post-abortive and parenting with the support of the clinic. So the clinic offered baby showers and material items and a program called Earn While You Learn. So moms could attend classes for themselves with free childcare and would get diapers and baby clothing and material items that they needed to help to raise their children. So I also ran a group for moms. It was started by one of the clients called Moms Forgotten No More. And she had a journey of loss of a child from different causes. One, abortion, and also loss of a toddler to natural causes. And so it was a grief group for moms, some of whom were processing their grief and had no children, no living children. She said that it was in church on a Mother's Day that the moms were asked to stand, and she didn't know if she had the right to stand because she didn't have her children with her. And so that was a really beautiful ministry to have a place for moms to deal with grief of any kind, loss of a child for any cause.
Yeah, I love what you're saying about the pregnancy center resources, the parenting classes, and the material goods. The stigma, especially in the media, maybe, is that pregnancy centers are there to manipulate women and forced births. And that's kind of this great stereotype of pregnancy centers. And while I certainly could see that some people are on the extreme side, that's never been my experience with pregnancy centers. I was just speaking at a luncheon for a pregnancy center, even here in LA. They usually use the same model, like you're saying, to kind of eliminate the need for abortion. My understanding of women who get abortion, some of them just feel like they have to, that they have no other choice, which is not a choice at all. That's not pro-choice if you feel cornered into that decision because of circumstance or because of your family or because you're still in school or you feel too young. And so what I see pregnancy centers doing, the good ones, is providing for all the things that a young woman or a young family might need to help provide for that new little life. I don't know that Planned Parenthood is doing the same thing. I don't know that Planned Parenthood is inclined to say to someone considering abortion what that could mean for them in the long run, or even if they're providing adoption options, which I believe is a parenting choice, by the way. It's just not
Absolutely.
self-parenting. I don't know what Planned Parenthood is providing, but I don't know it's not a comprehensive understanding of all the options. I feel they they push abortion in the way that people feel pregnancy centers push birth. Is there anything that you want someone who's post-abortive, whether that be someone, a woman who's had an abortion herself, or someone in her circle of influence, maybe her parents, boyfriend or husband, anyone kind of involved in the abortion decision-making process? Do you have anything that you'd like them to know about mental health or healing?
Absolutely, that we can't compare ourselves to other people, and we can't compare ourselves to how we were yesterday or a year ago or 10 years ago, that it is entirely expected that our understanding of things will evolve as we grow, and we're never done growing. And I guess my biggest gratitude is to know the mercy of God, and that psychology can't heal the way God can heal. We have an infinite capacity to be healed, so it's never over. There may be tremendous shame, awkwardness, discomfort, and even admitting that there was a difficulty with pregnancy. And it may be even more difficult to find the right person to talk to. Unfortunately, that's what I'm finding, is that this message of abortion is harmless. And I think there's another assumption in that literature that if a woman has problems after abortion, it's because she had problems before the abortion, that it's not because she's realizing that her child isn't here. There may be some professionals who, it feels like gaslighting to me, to blame the victim, that it's their fault that they're having this trouble, that we can find someone and find resources to help. So I consider this to be my favorite resource so far, the Forbidden Grief book by Teresa Burke. If anyone is wanting to find some validation of their feelings, it seems from my understanding that this is a very safe resource that would be a good place to start. Just as a Catholic, now that I'm kind of on my own professionally, I'm excited to be able to integrate what it means to be Catholic and to be in the mental health field, to understand the beauty of the sacraments. For anyone who may be affected by abortion and is Catholic, I would say that there is a wealth of support, within the Mass, within the sacrament. And for people who are struggling with abortion, who are not necessarily religious, to know that there may be support available for them through the Catholic Church, and they haven't even asked that question yet.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've heard of women affected by their abortion for decades. And in particular, one who gave a testimony at one of our Pulse events when Alex and I were running it. She said that for 40 years, she just didn't receive the Eucharist and she felt unworthy of it. The shame that she felt as people kind of climbed around her to go into the communion line, and that was devastating for me to hear. And I thought it was very indicative of that experience and the shame that one might feel, that for 40 years they don't feel worthy to receive the Eucharist, which is, for a Catholic, the source and summit of our faith. And other women have expressed similar sentiments too, that for 40 years or so, they're confessing the sin of abortion and never feeling quite cleansed of it. And also a devastating perspective that women can feel just that much shame about it. And even if you're not Catholic, I've heard of like some beautiful practices from Rachel's Vineyard women, like writing a letter to your child, or writing a letter to yourself. Being able to participate in that self-forgiveness too is kind of a beautiful practice. And I even know secular pro-life, my friend Kelsey, who runs that organization and founded it, they're typically known as the non-traditional pro-lifers, so atheists and things like that. I believe the last time I talked to Kelsey, they were trying to create a Rachel's Vineyard equivalent, which Rachel's Vineyard is Catholic, but they were trying to make one friendly for atheists too. So haven't been able to find if they have that yet, but I know it was in the works, and that was 3 or 4 years ago. So hopefully they have some sort of resources for that. So this idea of forbidden grief, that's devastating to me, that women don't even feel, even helping professionals aren't creating a space for them to be integrated with all of their experiences. One of the people at My Rachel's Vineyard who had an eating disorder, it's like she would change therapists from time to time, and she would tell her therapist, "Oh, I had an abortion," and they would say, "No, that has nothing to do with the eating disorder." And it wasn't until she contacted a priest that they said, "Oh, I think the abortion has everything to do with the eating disorder, the codependency, the this." And just because there's not research for it doesn't mean it's not integrated for a
Right.
person. And when she was given permission to be affected by her abortion negatively, that's when she went to Rachel's Vineyard. It was like
Right.
she was able to see it after decades of being told by helping professionals that it didn't affect her, to be able to see it as something that did very much affect her. And I know that's just one story, and I know that's anecdotal, but I do think it's powerful to see those stories. So, is there anything else you want to add or share?
I guess I've just been reflecting on my own training and work, and in many, many years of working with eating disorder clients, it kind of shocks me now that we never talked about abortion then in inpatient and outpatient settings. And in years of studying psychology, secular training, never talked about abortion in any context. And it just makes me think of all the missed opportunities that I've had in dealing with body trauma, chronic pain. My husband was an OBGYN, and he would send me clients with vague abdominal pain, no known medical explanation. It just makes me think of all the times when I missed, even as a Catholic, even as pro-life, even before I called myself pro-life, just all the dots that I didn't connect for myself and certainly were not connected for me. And so I feel like anyone who is listening who might be connected to mental health, that there's such a need for integration. You told me that you went to a Catholic psychology school. I did not, but I'm kind of working on that. And one of the things that I would be really interested in is if your school, if anyone at your school has kind of looked at this literature, the body keeps the score literature, view of the human person through a Catholic lens. There's no mention of abortion in this body of research, but how could we look at trauma living in the body and the conversation about the ways that abortion seems to affect women and not connect those dots? So I guess that's where I'm feeling very dissatisfied at this time, but also encouraged to keep making those connections.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like in this new chapter, even in your personal life with, I mean, I know it's your business practice, but it's huge for you that you're wanting to move forward in this. And I think I see it from my perspective, from my vantage point as a third party, what a gift it is that you've had all of this research and this practice and this study from the lens that you've had it from, because it's still useful research and you're still like brilliant and intelligent. And so whenever you are able to integrate that for us, like even reflecting it back to me right now and like seeing it from your perspective is going to be very valuable for this field. Like I see it like a passing of the baton. Maybe there weren't Catholic schools when you were going to school, but and I'm not a clinical psychologist, but there are clinical therapists who went to places like Divine Mercy University or here in LA, Pepperdine. I believe they have at least a Christian lens. Fuller Seminary here in Pasadena, it has that Christian lens, at least the desire for people to view psychology with an integrated lens and through a Christian anthropology is being passed down. Like it's happening now, and you're going to be able to kind of hold our hand. This little younger generation, you're going to be able to hold our hand and kind of propel us into Catholic professional workspaces as helping professionals. So I'm actually just really excited. I feel like you're just gonna your generation of Catholic therapists and I'm gonna cry now and helping professionals as like the what is that machine that like it like does that like with the rocks in the old war zones?
Oh, a catapult.
Yeah, I feel like you're just going to catapult us into that, and this kind of
Oh,
new generation of Catholic therapists, Christian therapists is going to really be like a revolution of healing for people, because it will become like even all the whole health thing and the whole foods
right,
thing, like there
right.
is a wave of like wanting to be integrated, and that's really exciting, and it should be seen just as I really don't want you to see your missed opportunities, but how you're going to help us, this generation and help us be better
No.
in this field. You've mothered it. I mean, you're going to mother it.
Thank you. Thank you. It reminds me of when I have two daughters and two sons. When my two daughters were in middle school, we went to a workshop at the pro-life pregnancy center in our town called Woman 360, and it was all about the gift of fertility and a lot of biology, right? And we went through that together. It was a mother-daughter 4 hours of biology. But as a psychologist, it blew my mind because to understand, puberty till menopause, what happens and what are the risks of harm to the gift of fertility, it changed everything. And there's those little seeds that were planted for my girls. The take home book was the Jason Everett How to Find Your Soulmate Without Losing Your Soul. Like, they were in middle school, like they just kind of tucked it away. And then I kind of tucked that information away, but that was very formative for all of us. And then my oldest daughter went on in high school to pull that book out and had a book study and started a chapter of Students for Life. And it was kind of at the same time that I joined the pregnancy center and did some training in natural family planning, the FEM model, and
Mm-hmm.
had these students, like, had all these high school and college girls charting their cycles, and we were having, groups in our home. And so I know that my daughters, and you guys worked together through LA Right to Life, and they were involved in Students for Life. So I kind of consider you a daughter, as well, in the pro-life circle. So it's just beautiful that we're here today, kind of on these different journeys. I have one daughter who's teaching in a Catholic school, and another daughter who's connected to a Catholic university. So I'm proud of all of you. So proud of you,
Oh,
Krista.
yeah, no, thank you. I'm really, really thankful for this conversation. This has been very enlightening, and I'm very excited for your new practice. I'll be praying for you. Did I tell you that I ran into your oldest daughter in Portugal, by the way?
No.
And for World Youth Day. She ended up clicking up with our group because we had people from all over Louisiana, but four people from LA went with the Sisters of Our Lady of Sorrows. And then and then what is her name? I don't
Hannah.
remember. Hannah. Yes, okay. Obviously I know Haley. Hannah, who I don't know as well as Haley, but yeah, so Hannah was there and was like, "Oh my gosh, am I meeting you in Fatima right now? Like, I'm seeing you again in Fatima. Like, I haven't seen you in 5 years, and we're just chilling at Fatima together for a day." So, um, anyway,
That is
small
so
world. So
beautiful. Small world. Holy Spirit working.
I'm really thankful for your family. I mean, yeah, I mean, Haley obviously is a rock star in the pro-life movement from my Louisiana Right to Life days, and I know I've talked to you before about this and about when I was studying, the effect of abortion on siblings. And so just this continued conversation over years' time is what I'm saying is helpful, I think, for probably both of us to understand this from the psychological literature and
Absolutely.
background. I'm glad our paths keep crossing. And
Absolutely. I would love to talk again.
definitely, I mean, I don't know if I even shared my capstone with you, but if I haven't shared it with you, maybe I'll send it to you so that you can listen to it and look at it and
Okay.
yeah, maybe give some academic. I feel like so not an academic person. I'm the worst academic ever, but because I like stories and I like people, and I feel like their literature can tell that, but I prefer like testimonial almost, and I used a lot of that in my capstone, but definitely used the Kubler-Ross grief model, Therese Rando's How to Go On Living After Someone You Love Dies. That was how I made my grief intervention, but I would love your feedback on it.
Absolutely. I've heard you speak, and the way you've written so beautifully to your sister. It's beautiful to see, and I think it gives people permission to grieve.
Hmm.
So thank you. Thank you for that.
Well, Miss Jodie, Dr. Jodie, I don't know what to call you. I always call you Miss Jodie, but
Miss Jodie is fine.
Dr. Guth, thank you for joining us. I hope that we can have another conversation, and I'm excited for you to be the grief to grace or the Rachel's Vineyard realm of things with your background. That's so, so needed, especially in post-abortion healing and these kind of great big T traumas. So thank you for your work. Thank you for your ministry, and I'll be praying for you, and I hope you'll come back soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Take care.